Okay, welcome back. This is just a set of drills for doing views and functions. Now, if this was a face-to-face class, I'd probably put something on the board and say, okay, type this. I can't do that here, so I'm going to do the typing. And quite frankly, that's not near as good as actually having you do it. So again, watching me do it, I don't know how useful that is. So I'm going to go through this thing kind of slow. And you could follow along if you want. You could download this file and follow along and actually do it at your end. So first thing we need to do is to go grab the file. So it's in supplemental materials on Canvas. So drill down to that section. And then there's one called Chapter7Drills. I'm just going to double click on that guy and boom, I got it up and running. Okay, so let's just look. If you guys know how I start, I prototype a query. So I do select asterisk just because I just want to see it work. Select asterisk from, and also it helps with the IntelliSense because I don't have to type anything. And so this one is kind of complicated because it actually has multiple tables in it, multiple joins. So the purpose for a view typically is to hide columns, right? Hide complexity with like a gazillion joins, and perhaps throw in a computed column. So I'm going to run this just to make sure it works. And I go, yeah, okay, that works. I mean, it's got a lot of junk in here I don't need. And so here, I've kind of thinned it down. I've gone through and said, okay, I don't need all those columns, because remember, one of the purposes is to hide columns. And then I throw in a computed column here, quantity times price. So this is basically the exact same thing. It still has those multiple joins in there, except all I did was thin the columns out and add an extended price to it. So this is a typical thing you might want to see in a view, right? Because thinning columns and, that's what it's all about. So to create a view, all I have to do is to have something that says create view, boom. And then just copy and paste this guy in here. So I'm going to go here and just execute this guy. And now I have a view that has that exact data in it. Now here's the cool part. You remember how in, like if you wanted to go to a table, you could go to a table and say, right click, select top 1,000 rows, and then boop. Well, you can do that with a view. Here it is. Select top 1,000 rows, and boop. So once again, this makes it simple. Anyone can do this, right? No special skills required. This is a very complex query with lots of moving parts, and they don't know anything about it. All they know is they right-click and say order info, and it gives them exactly the columns that they want. All right, making sense? Okay. Let me get back to my guy. All right. So how do you use a view? Well, one way to do it is the way I just did it, where you just, do a right-click. But if you're doing it from the command line, it's just this, right? You just close your eyes and pretend that it's a table. That's it. Nothing there. Okay, just plain old asterisk from, and it gives you all the columns. Okay, now let's do a table function. So a table function is essentially the same thing, except that I can throw in a parameter that I can use in the where clause. This one gave me all the information for every single SKU in the system. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want to have a where clause. So this starts off the same. Let's just go through the rules. I do a create function. I use lowercase f. Order info by SKU. I try to make these things make sense. So what am I doing? I'm getting the order information, but not all order information like up here. I'm getting order information by a particular SKU, which means I have to add a SKU as a parameter. Adding it as a parameter. And then it returns a table. Up here, it just says create view as. Here, it returns a table as, and then returned in something in parentheses. Now, I started out with the exact same code as before, and just threw in this one line where order item SKU is equal to the SKU parameter that got put in here. The SKU parameter, okay? So this one can't really have a where clause. I mean, you could put a where clause in there, but it would never change. This one, I get to change the where clause every single time I run it. So here's an example of running it with that particular SKU. So let's just do it. And what? Oh, it helps if you actually create the dang thing first. Okay, now I've done it. So let me do this. and hit execute. Boom. Okay. So I'm going to do another one. Okay. I'm just going to type, select, from F order info by SKU, except this time I'm going to type in another SKU number, 101-200. Okay, now I'm going to run this guy. Now notice I didn't have to go in and change the function. The function stays the same. I have two separate lines. This one gives me the function, passes the function for that particular SKU, and then this one over again. So I do not have to change the function in order to get more views, get more of these things out of it. Okay? So once again, it's in the where clause. Now, I will confess, if you go down here to programmability and table functions, and do a refresh, okay, I cannot do a right click and then get that. Why? Because it would have to ask me for the parameter, right? It didn't have to ask me. Doing this, it didn't have to ask me anything. But here, I would have to, ask something. And there's no real way to do that. Okay, is that making sense? All right. So next is a scalar function. So a scalar function returns just one thing, right? So this typically, this is like math. It'd be a sum or an average or a count or a min or a max, those kind of things, typically. So here we go. I want to know, of all of my buyers, I want to know how much product they've been selling. I want to know how well are they doing, okay? So I'm going to create me a function called sales by buyer. Now see how the name kind of makes sense? What am I after? I'm after the sum of all the sales associated with a particular buyer. If I type in Joe Blow, I'm going to get the sales for Joe Blow, right? Okay, good. Now this one's different. Up here, we had returns table. Here, I say returns money because that's what this guy is, right? And then up here, I said, as return, and then things went in parentheses. Because typically this is all just one giant line, okay? Here it is possible you could have multiple lines. Like I have a declare, a select, and a return. So it uses the begin and end syntax, which is a bit weird. So if this was a normal programming class, you'd have to declare a variable. So I declare a variable called sales total. And then I write an SQL statement with a where clause that uses the information that was passed to it. Now, I'll confess, this part right here is funky syntax that we have not seen before. Typically, it'd be select, sum, extended price from, order, join on that, and join on that, where the buyer is equal to the buyer's name up here, okay? But so this is the little syntax that's kind of funky. All right, so now I have got a thing that's going to give me the sum of extended price from all the order information where the buyer is equal to something. So let's build this guy. Cool. All right. Now, when it comes time to using this guy, it's a little different, okay? Typically, you don't do this with a constant. Typically, you don't go in here and say, give me sales by buyer, and then you put Mary Smith in there. That's not normally the way it works. So let's just ignore this part for just a second. Select buyer from buyer. That seems perfectly normal. And then somehow, behind the scenes, it's going to go look up, given the buyer's name, it's going to go look up and see how much money they made, okay? And there's lots of joins involved. And again, you don't have to know any of that stuff to be able to operate this guy. And I have no idea why you have to have DBO dot. I wish I could explain that. All right, so let me just run this. So this is not going to be providing me that single value just once. It's going to be a single value for every row in the table. It's going to give me that single value for every row in the table. Okay, here we go. So Cindy Lowe, it went and did the math and came up with that. Jerry Martin, Mary Smith, Nancy Myers, Pete Hansen. Okay, see how this thing works? Again, let's just do a little summary here. Views typically, hide the complexity of a bunch of joins. Maybe hide some columns, maybe do some computed columns. Table functions basically do the same thing, except for you have a variable that you can use inside a where clause. So you don't have to get them all, you can get only the one you're after. And then scalar functions are doing math. And typically they show up on the select statement. Okay, not in the from clause, not like a table. And you can, again, pass a parameter to it. Okay, now I'm not sure how helpful this is. Maybe you got an awful lot of it. Maybe just reading this dang thing from supplemental materials will help as much as watching me do it. Again, please, take the time and actually run this thing and kind of get familiar with it. All right, so we are at the end of this, and I'll see you again in a next video.